Hi everyone. Today, I want to share a story I've kept to myself for a long time. It's the story of my infidelity. Yes, I cheated on my husband. I'm not proud of it, but I want to be honest. It didn't happen suddenly, and it wasn't simple. This is a story about love, silence, lost parts of yourself, and the moment I realized I didn't really know who I was anymore. If you're ready to hear the truth, let's begin. They say the heart doesn't break all at once. It loosens in silence. Like fabric left too long in the sun, it frays softly, invisibly, until one day the threads fall away with no sound at all. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to stop loving Daniel. It was quieter than that. Gentler, almost. My days with him were soft and predictable, which is to say they were kind. Our mornings began with the smell of toasted bread and the hush of a kitchen radio. He never rushed me. He folded my sweaters when I left them on the couch. On Sundays, he filled the bathtub before I even asked. We were good at small things. But somewhere between the dishwasher's hum and the hallway light that flickered without fixing, something in me began to ache. Not for something loud or scandalous, not even for someone else. Just a different kind of silence. One that listened back. Maybe it started last autumn. The leaves had turned late that year, hesitant in their fading. I remember walking home from the market with my scarf too loose and the wind slipping beneath it, cool and teasing. I had bought pears. Daniel didn't like pears, but I'd bought them anyway, unthinking, or maybe hoping he would learn to like them. He didn't comment when he saw them on the counter. Just reached for the apples. It was a little thing, of course. The smallest thing. But that's the trouble with little things. They add up like footsteps behind you. You don't notice the pattern until it's already made a path. In the evenings, Daniel would read. I'd sit beside him, knitting or pretending to, and we'd exchange quiet smiles that felt more like habits. He asked me how my day was. I said it was fine. He told me about the market forecasts or the plumbing at work. I nodded. We were, in all ways, what you might call content. And yet, when I lay awake at night, I'd find myself listening, not to the sounds around me, but to something underneath. A low, persistent thrum in my chest. Not sadness, not exactly. Restlessness, maybe. Or the memory of who I used to be before I became so quiet. One night, I found myself standing by the kitchen window, long after Daniel had gone to bed. The street lamp outside flickered gently, spilling gold across the pavement. The neighbor's cat slipped through the hedges like a secret. I held a glass of water I didn't want, the cold of it pressing into my palm. And I thought, this is my life. This soft, safe, quiet life. And I didn't know, just then, whether I loved it or feared it. It began with a voice. Not even a voice meant for me. Just one that drifted across the air and struck something that had long been silent. The library was nearly empty that day. The kind of late afternoon where the light stretches thin and the clock ticks louder than it should. I'd come in for a book I wasn't even sure I wanted. Something about 19th century gardens. I remember only because I never did check it out. I didn't even open it. I was wandering between aisles when I heard him. He was speaking to the librarian, not loudly, but with an ease that made the room feel smaller. Something in the way he spoke, it wasn't the words. It was the warmth behind them. A kind of brightness I hadn't expected to find among the dust and paper. I didn't see him, not yet. I only heard the way he said thank you, like it mattered. Like the gesture of being helped had genuinely touched him. I stood still. Not hiding. Just choosing not to move. For a moment, it was enough just to listen. His footsteps passed, and I waited until I was sure the air had cleared of his presence before I walked out. I didn't think of it much afterward. Not then. It was a flutter, a flicker. A single raindrop on a dry roof. But 2 days later, I returned to the library. And I didn't tell Daniel. He was fixing the door to the garage that morning. I kissed his cheek, told him I had errands to run, and left without my list. And there he was again. The man with the voice. Sitting by the window with a book open and a cup of coffee in a paper cup. He looked like he belonged in that light. The kind of person who wouldn't need to speak to be heard. He wore an old coat, neat but softened by years. And he didn't look up when I passed. I felt foolish, a little. As if I'd staged the moment. as if I'd wandered into my own life with borrowed lines. I sat a few tables away. I pulled out a book I hadn't planned to read and turned pages I didn't absorb. Every now and then I stole glances, short ones, cowardly ones. I wasn't looking for anything more than a pulse of interest. A sign that life still stirred under the layers I'd built over the years. At one point, he looked up. Our eyes met for a moment, one heartbeat, maybe two. He smiled. A polite, distant smile. The kind you offer a stranger in public. But it warmed something inside me. Not desire, not yet. Just the awareness of being seen. And then, just as gently, we both looked away. I left soon after. When I returned home, Daniel was making dinner. He was standing by the stove, humming something under his breath. The smell of garlic softened the air. "Did you get everything you needed?" he asked. I nodded, hanging up my coat. "More or less." He kissed the top of my head, and I leaned into him briefly. But my thoughts felt like they were standing in another room, watching someone else's life unfold. Watching a woman very much like me fold herself into a story she hadn't written. That night, as we sat across from each other at the table, I noticed a small streak of flour on his cheek. I reached out to brush it off. He smiled, half embarrassed, and thanked me. And for some reason, I wanted to cry. Not because I didn't love him, but because I suddenly understood how easily you could live beside someone for years and still long for something unnamed. Something that wasn't theirs to give. I started walking more. Not for exercise. Not for errands. Just walking. Through streets I knew well and ones I didn't. Past houses with curtains drawn and gardens left to themselves. There was something soothing in it, the rhythm of steps, the sound of my own breath, the permission to think without speaking. Sometimes I walked to the library. Sometimes I didn't go inside at all. But when I did, I hoped to see him. It wasn't every time. A few visits passed in silence, the chair by the window empty, the air still. On those days, I felt both relief and disappointment curling inside me, like smoke with nowhere to rise. And then one Thursday afternoon, gray and mild, he was there again. He looked up as I entered. Not by accident this time. And when I moved toward a nearby table, he offered a small smile, this one slower, as though it were meant only for me. "Back again?" he said softly, as if we'd spoken before. I nodded. "It's quiet here. I like the quiet." He closed his book halfway. "Me too. The world's gotten loud in all the wrong ways." I remember smiling at that. I wasn't used to strangers saying things that felt like secrets I hadn't known how to name. We spoke for only a few minutes. About books. Weather. The best time to plant tulips. His name was Simon. He had a voice like a worn sweater, gentle, familiar, a little frayed at the edges. Nothing in our words was intimate, and yet, it felt that way. I left before him, not trusting myself to stay. I told myself it was harmless, that people have conversations every day, that I was only being polite. But when I lay beside Daniel that night, the warmth of Simon's voice lingered in places I couldn't name. Daniel was already asleep, his arm draped across his side of the bed, steady as always. I watched the soft rise and fall of his breath. There was something in it that used to calm me, that used to make me feel protected, safe. But now it made me feel like a ghost. Present, but untouchable. I turned on my side, facing the window. The moon hung low, catching the glass in a pale shimmer. A second window, in a way, a reflection layered over the real. And somewhere in the night, I whispered a truth I hadn't yet meant to say. I don't know what I'm looking for anymore. The next day, I found myself in front of my old jewelry box. The one I hadn't opened in years. It was tucked away in the back of the closet, beneath scarves I no longer wore. Inside were tangled necklaces, old rings, a pair of earrings I'd worn once on a vacation to Florence. And there, among the silver and dust, was a letter I had written to Daniel in our first year of marriage. I don't remember ever giving it to him. The handwriting was younger, rounder, full of too many exclamation points. I had written, "You feel like home and fire at the same time." I stared at those words for a long time. Now, Daniel still felt like home. But the fire? It was something I hadn't felt in a very long time. And in that quiet, painful realization, I began to wonder. Can we be grateful for a love that once saved us and still find ourselves drawn toward something else? I didn't have the answer. Only the questions. And Simon's name, barely a whisper, beginning to echo in the corners of my life. The day it happened, it rained. Not a hard, angry storm, but a slow and steady rain, the kind that blurs the sky and makes the world seem quieter than it really is. The library was closed for renovations. I hadn't planned to see him that day. I hadn't planned anything at all. But life, I've come to learn, doesn't always ask for plans. It just arrives. Simon had invited me for coffee once before, casually, a passing suggestion neither of us acted on. But that morning, I found myself standing outside the small cafe near the bookstore, and there he was, inside, already waiting. As if he'd known I'd come. There's no need to describe what followed. It was not wild. It was not reckless. It was a softness I hadn't remembered I still craved. A quiet kind of intimacy, not the kind that burns, but the kind that holds your gaze a little too long, that makes space feel smaller just by being shared. A hand brushed mine. A laugh lingered longer than it should. A question was asked not with words, but with silence. And then a door closed. And another opened. The room smelled of cedar and coffee. A record played in the corner, something old and orchestral. Rain tapped gently at the windows, asking nothing of us. And I let myself disappear for a while. When I returned home, Daniel was sitting in the living room, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I entered, smiled like he always did, and asked if I wanted to order in or cook something simple together. I nodded, said whatever you feel like, and went to change. My clothes still smelled faintly of rain. That night, we watched a movie we'd both seen before. He rested his hand on my leg. I let it stay. I said goodnight the same way I always did. And when I closed my eyes beside him, I wasn't sure which world I belonged to anymore. I thought the guilt would come like a flood. But it didn't. It came in drips. The way memories return in flashes, unbidden. The way you glance at a photograph too long and feel your chest ache without knowing why. Simon didn't message me that night. I didn't expect him to. And yet, I thought of him as I stirred my tea. As I folded laundry. As I passed a mirror and caught sight of myself, not older, not younger. Just different. Like a version of me I hadn't been in years. I had betrayed Daniel. But I had also betrayed the version of myself who thought love, once planted, would bloom forever without watering. I wasn't proud. I wasn't excusing anything. I just didn't know what to do now. Because in Simon's presence, I felt awake. Seen. As if I still carried colors Daniel no longer noticed. And yet, Daniel, he had been kind. Faithful. Gentle in a world that often wasn't. I could list the ways he loved me in the quiet things he did every day. I knew how he took his coffee. I knew which side of the bed he turned to when he couldn't sleep. We had built something solid. But now, something inside me whispered, is solid enough? So I sit here now, writing this by the light of a window cracked open to the night. The air is thick with summer. A moth flutters against the screen. And I do not know who to stay with. I only know that I am at a crossroad made not of road signs, but of hearts. And whatever path I choose, something will be lost. Maybe even myself.